All right, I'm going to stay with the issue of The Voice just momentarily. We'll get to some international issues with my next guest, Greg Sheridan, of course, from the Australian, foreign editor at The Australian, joins me now. But Greg, just on this issue of The Voice, I want to stay with you because part of the narrative has been, if this goes down, if Australians vote no, we'll be seen as a racist backwater in the Southern Hemisphere. That's part of the shtick. Give us your sense of how that would play out, how true that will be received overseas, and what can the government do in the event this is lost to pull that back?
Well, Peter, Australia is perhaps the least racist country in the entire world, certainly one of the least racist countries. You'd know my wife and kids are not Caucasian. You know, I've lived in a multiracial family all my life, and this is one of the least racist countries in the world. So if people get the impression that we're racist, it will only be because we tell them so. So the international reaction will depend on what we say about ourselves. And in this context, no one will have a bigger responsibility to the national interest than Prime Minister Albanese and his government and the leaders of the Yes campaign. Now, if it should be, and I'm not quite as confident as Andrew that the thing is completely, that the contest is over yet. And indeed, I think that's a very dangerous feeling for the no camp to have. But say this thing goes down badly, it loses 55-45 or something like that. The thing will be for Anthony Albanese and his government and the Yes leaders to say they got it wrong, that the Australian people had reasonable hesitations and voted out of those reasonable constitutional hesitations, and that they remain full of goodwill and love for Aboriginal Australians, that indeed many Aboriginal Australians didn't like this particular constitutional amendment and they also voted against it. If, on the other hand, they go down anything like the road of Marcia Langton and Noel Pearson until 2 minutes ago, they themselves will label Australia as a racist country. Now, anyone who knows Australia knows that's rubbish. And a lot of people in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific know Australia well. They've got brothers and sisters and so on who live here, and they know what a fantastic place it is with so much opportunity and so little discrimination. But in New York, in Paris, to some extent in London, we will be, blackguarded, and that will cause us some temporary damage. It won't be permanent because it's just so much in contradiction of the reality, unless, of course, we then provoke racial conflict. If the Yes campaigners then go on to say the matter was lost because of racial hatred held by the majority of Australians, they may well exacerbate racial conflict. But it's only if we do that to ourselves that we'll suffer any long-term reputational or social damage out of voting no.
So this will be a test of how I think the Prime Minister responds on the night, if we even get a result on the night. You're absolutely right, I think, to point out it's what they retail, the government retails to the world if the referendum fails. That will determine what the world thinks of us. Spot on. While I've got you, I want to go to the US because we had the Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy out today, their time early morning, announcing an impeachment inquiry into Biden and the president's family business dealings. Now, Donald Trump was twice impeached, of course, by the House, but acquitted by the Senate. Give us a sense of where this might go in the coming months, Greg.
Well, I think everything we've learned about the Biden family is incredibly smelly, and it does seem prima facie that there's a strong case for corruption there. There's no smoking gun proof that any money went into the back pocket of Joe Biden himself. I think it's perfectly legitimate for the Republicans to have an impeachment inquiry. Given the whistleblowers out of the Justice Department and the FBI and so on who've said they've been told to go slow on Hunter Biden investigations, it's reasonable to have an inquiry. I don't think the evidence as yet would justify the removal of Joe Biden from office, but nor do I think probably as yet the Republicans could even get an impeachment vote in the Congress, because they'd have to hold all of their own members, and I think, probably 10 or 15 wouldn't go for it. However, if the evidence continues to harden, then I think they would have a good chance of getting an impeachment vote. And of course, Biden will be acquitted in the Senate, where the Democrats control the numbers. You've got to have a 60-40 majority to sustain an impeachment in the Senate, and the Democrats have 51 senators. So impeachment will certainly fail in the Senate, as it did with Donald Trump, as it did with Bill Clinton. But this is undoubtedly a very bad development in American politics. I predicted when the Democrats impeached Trump twice, I think wrongly, that this would just inevitably lead to future impeachments. Impeachments will now become the equivalent of censure motions. They'll just be another dodge that you do in politics, rather than a serious constitutional measure to remove, a plainly criminal president.
Yeah, I think it's shocking that we're headed down this path, and all the litigious stuff against Donald Trump as well. I think this is not how you win or lose elections. Greg Sheridan, thank you as always.